part of the library's webinar series on library tutorials. I'm updating an earlier one I did about a year or so ago on EndNote X8, and it's called X8 for 18 Roman numeral X plus 8. So it's now available to Augusta University faculty, students, and staff. So what I'd like to do then is basically get started showing you where that is. So first what you want to do is just go down to your A to Z index. You want to go to I for information technology, and from there you want to go to the Health Sciences campus. And once you're at that Health Sciences campus, you're just going to scroll down until you come to the software link. When you click on software, you're going to see a list, an alphabetical list, and on the left hand side you'll see one that simply says EndNote Obtain Software. We have versions X7 and X8 for both PC and Mac, and when you click on this, it'll show you how to download and also get the product key, and you'll need your NetID to get that. So once you download that to your computer, it's going to ask you to update it, and the version that we're using now in EndNote, I believe, is version X2. I'm going to go to my help menu, and I want to go ahead and take a look at what we have about EndNote X8. We're using X8.2, so that's what we have in the Windows version. So what does this actually do? Well, we're actually showing that EndNote works with both Word, has to work with Word, along with a browser. And so right now I'll be demonstrating it for you inside both Chrome and Firefox browsers. If you're a Mac user, I am recommending that you not use Safari, but that you use Chrome with EndNote. That's what we'd like you to go ahead and do. So what does EndNote actually do? It actually helps you hold records inside a library. And we have a list of records here in a library. I'll bring up another one here that I just did the other day. I call it Citizen Science 2018. You can see that there's a list with different panels or panes of information that help you use all these things. So you can download records for journals, books, book chapters, government documents, websites, legal citations, and when you go ahead and save these items, you then go into Word and you can insert the citation or reference in EndNote into a Word document and then get it formatted in an output style that makes the most sense for your document. So you can have an output style for APA 6, you can have an output style for JAMA, you could have an output style for Nature, you can have an output style for hundreds of bibliographic styles, and EndNote makes those all available to you. When you download the program, several hundred will be loaded with the program. You can also go to the EndNote site and download more styles if you don't find a style there that you need. So all it's trying to do is help you when you start to write to basically organize things and embed things and edit things in a way that makes it very easy. You don't have to type everything out by hand. Now I'm going to demonstrate to you how EndNote works in real time. So I'm actually going to pull up this document. This document is just called Citizen Science, and I'm going to take my cursor, I'm going to place it using EndNote X8. We're going to use a New England Journal of Medicine style. I'm just going to go ahead and put a insertion point. I'm going to go back to my EndNote library. I'm going to pick two references here just at random. I'm going to click this little insert citation icon in EndNote, and it's going to pivot back to the Word document. We see our insertion point here after the word community, and now it's put the superscripted 1 and 2, and it started a reference list in New England Journal of Medicine style. So you can see here where it's a very effective, easy way to do things. And likewise, you can go back to EndNote, pick out another reference. You can go into Word. I can move my citation point, and then I can go ahead and insert it. In this case, I'm inserting the selected citation from the Word document, from the EndNote X8 ribbon, and it goes ahead and adds that one as well. Likewise, if an editor comes back to you or a professor and says, gee, that first article by Alfieri is not really needed, what you can do is you can simply take that reference and remove it. So you not only use EndNote to put things in a reference, you also use EndNote to remove a reference from a document. And if you don't like New England Journal style and you want to use another one like JAMA, you can simply keep instant formatting on and simply update the citations to reflect that change in output styles. Obviously, if you use another one with a totally different system like APA 6, the in-text will change as well as the reference list below. So you can kind of see how that works. So what I'd like to do now is just show you how EndNote's organized. So you saw what I had before. I had the name of the library. This pane that's very prominent that I was pulling references from is called the references list. I call it the library, and here's a list of all the references that we have. Down below we have a reference window, and it has a reference tab, so you can actually see the reference that's highlighted. You can go in and edit any one of the fields of information, like the author field or the title field. Any of the fields can be edited. There's also a preview tab, so it allows you to see that based on the style that you have selected in the menu of EndNote, it'll actually reformat that reference in that particular style. So here you can kind of see an APA 6. I can go back and go into a JAMA style, and you can kind of preview it. Whenever there's full text or any kind of reference that's attached to a record, and you can attach up to 30 records or so in standard file types, we mostly concentrate on the PDFs. You can see here that the PDF, there's a link and also a paperclip to allow you to attach files to a record as well. So that's how that works. On the left hand side you see this blue area, and this is the groups panel. So when we're in this library mode, this basic mode, you can see that we can create groups. So I can actually go ahead and create or tag references by just creating a group name and then highlighting references that are inside the reference list and tagging them to my group. So if I created a group here called Head and Neck, I could then take an article like this one by Amanon on Head and Neck and tag it and put it into that group. Why do I do that? That way I don't maybe have to run a search. I can just simply click on Head and Neck, and that one will be displayed for me to see everything that's in that group. I can go back and click on all references again and take a look at it. Now let's say I have a lot of references, because you can put as many references as you want into a library, and I do have users that have a single library that they use and curate all the time. When you get a lot of references, they're not that easy to browse. We do have a search panel. So I usually hide this search panel, but if you go to this icon bar, you'll see a link that will either show or hide the search panel, and there's various fields you can look at to search. So it searches not only the reference but also any PDF or PDF notes that you've made, any annotations. So you can see that it's a very powerful tool to simply search any part of a record inside EndNote. There's actually 4 panels. So we have the references list, we have the reference tab, which also shows you a preview in the output style as long as any attached PDFs. We have a group area, and we also have a search panel. So we have those 4 main areas. We also have 2 bars. We have a menu bar, which you typically see, and in Macs this will be slightly different than what I'm going to demonstrate to you today in Windows. And we also have an icon bar. So all 3 of those things work extremely well. Now you can also customize any part of the library to your liking. Um, Inside Mac, you will see a layout tab that's up near the icon area. Inside Windows, if you go to the bottom right, there is a layout tab that allows you to manage how you want these panels to look. So you can simply highlight it and change how you want those panels to look. As well, you can manage any of the fonts. You can manage these how many things look by simply going to Edit and Preferences in Mac. You would go to the EndNote X8 menu down to Preferences, and what it would allow you to do is not only tell you what fields you want to display, and you can display up to 10 columns of information inside of EndNote. You can also change the font sizes. So here I kind of moved the fonts up to a little bit larger size to make them more viewable. You can also have other areas like Find Full Text. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about folder locations for both styles. Those are the most important things that you'll also handle. And we also have term lists as well. So those are all important areas that we look at inside our preferences group. So having done that, I'll also tell you that you can manipulate how things look inside EndNote simply by clicking on a header. It'll Z to A or A to Z any of the sections that I click on. And those are all very helpful to simply help you look for records. So I find that I do manipulate and move things around all the time. You also see that there's a paperclip column. This paperclip lets me know if there's any full text that's attached to a specific reference. There's this little dot. This dot column tells me if I've actually opened or not opened a record. So in this case, I've actually viewed all of them. These are not bolded. These are regular text fonts, and I've actually gone in and looked at many of these records. And then if you look around, there's the session numbers that come from the database. You can also look at the record number within the library. Notes fields, you can display all sorts of things. Now if I were to open up one of these records, and let's just say I open up this one, you can see that this is what a common record would look like. I can look at this inside the reference panel, but I like to double click and open it so you can see it more easily. So here we see authors listed. Each author gets their own line. We have year, title, things that you would normally expect to see, and we can edit any of these fields. Once I edit a field and make a change, once I close the record, any changes I make will be saved, and I can make a lot of different savings. You can see here the file attachment field that I talked about earlier is blank. That just simply means that there are no file attachments on this record right now. So having done that, let's go ahead and I'm going to close out this, and we're going to start from zero. We've seen how it works. We've seen what an EndNote library looks like. So now, how would you get started from scratch in EndNote, creating a library and then populating that library with records? So let's go ahead and get started with that idea in mind. So I'm going to just take this little gray X, I'm going to close that, and what I'm going to do is we're going to go to File, and under File, under EndNote X, and in Mac I believe it's under the EndNote X8 menu, you simply go to New, and this creates a new library. And what you're creating are actually two parts of a library. I'm going to save this to my desktop. It is a file. By default, it's going to use the name My EndNote Library. We really don't want you to use that. So I'm just going to call this one, I'll call it the Greenblatt Library Sample. Okay, and I'm going to leave it on my desktop, and I'm going to save it. So what I'm doing is I am creating an EndNote library file, and there's two parts. There's the .enl, which will hold a lot of the references and such with this particular library. What it will also do is it will also save There's also a data folder, and the data folder has the same name as the library. So Greenblatt library sample.enl. There's also a data folder. And the data folder simply holds any file attachments plus any term lists, and we'll talk about term lists in a little while, in your library. So how would we go about and populate things? Well, normally we'd go to our library homepage. We would go ahead and open up a database. So I'm going to demonstrate two databases that you might use. I'm simply using a Firefox browser. I'm going to click on PubMed. And so if I type in the word stroke and Augusta, just to get some records, I can go ahead and mark records. So if I just simply check mark items in my result list, I'm selecting them, and then on any page of search results there's going to be a Send To tab. It's going to ask you to choose a destination. In PubMed I have two choices. I can go to the Citation Manager if I want to immediately export records from PubMed into the EndNote library that I have open, or I can save things to a clipboard if I'm going to be several searches in PubMed. And the clipboard's another place where I can simply hold a record until I'm ready to export it. Here I'm going to highlight with the radio button the Citation Manager and say create the file. Now based on your browser you'll get different experiences. If you use IE, if you use Chrome, if you use Firefox, there's different ways it will export. Sometimes in Chrome in the bottom left you'll see a little file kind of pop up that you're exporting. You just simply mash that little link again and it will kick it or push those records from the browser into the library. Here I've set up Firefox so that when I click create file it should automatically export into the library, and you'll see here in the bottom left it says we're showing 3 of 3. We have 3 references that were put into this particular library. So you can kind of see what's going on there. So that's actually a very successful export inside PubMed. So that's very easy to do, and a lot of our users do use PubMed. That one works extremely well. Another one of the ones we like to use is CINAHL with FullText, and we have a lot of EBSCO platformed databases that would do this. So if I were to pick out stroke again and I just want to go ahead and run a search, I normally wouldn't tell you to search this way, of course, but we just want to get some results. In this case, anytime you're inside EBSCO, what you do is there's a little folder, and once you click on the little folder icon it turns from blue to yellow, and the yellow folder just simply means that you have items inside a folder. And you can simply go to a folder view. You can select these and export at that time, and you're going to see over here an export link. And once I save those, by default it's going into an RIS format. Anytime you do ASCII export, you're looking for EndNote or RIS format, an old-fashioned format, but it works great. We simply say OK. If it says Research Soft Direct Export Helper, or if it says EndNote, those are both perfectly OK. Simply say OK, and there's the 3 that I just took from CINAHL, and now we're showing those 3. So the most recent exported records will be shown to you, and then simply I go to the Groups panel, click on All References, and all 6 will simply go back in for viewing. So that's how that simply works. We just go into the database. We can simply go and take references, and we can go ahead and just export them in. Now I will tell you, if I were to go to Firefox just right now and go back to the home page, a lot of the databases we have work very, very well with EndNote. Some do not. So if we were to go through this list and take a look, Access Medicine is not really an indexed database. That's not really going to work. Up to Date, again, is something that we don't really export records from. It doesn't really work well with it. ClinicalTrials.gov is not set up to export a record. So with those, you can go into your EndNote record, you can go to the references area and click new reference. And you can simply add a record. And you can pick a reference type. I mentioned all the different types we had before. You can go in and manually add a record. So if it was a website, something from up to date, you can simply go in and pick a specific type that you want. I do a lot of book chapters, electronic book sections. Those are all the types of things that we do a lot of here. Government documents, and you simply fill out the record and close it, and it simply saves it. Now I'm not going to fill one out, but you kind of get the gist of how that works. Now, what are some of the other things you want to do when you first set up your library? One of the things you want to do is you want to look at this menu. You noticed on my library I have a quite extensive menu. I do a lot of different work for different people, and I have a lot of different types of output styles that appear in my menu. By default, you're going to get 4 basic output types that appear in there, and what we want you to do when that happens is customize that menu. And how you customize it, you go to Edit, you go to Output Styles, and then you open the Style Manager. And when you open the Style Manager, you'll see all the hundreds of output styles that are being offered to you. And it's an A to Z list, and what you would do is you simply check mark or deselect ones you want to see or not see inside your list. So there's a lot of ones here that I do keep. If I want to add one or subtract one, I just simply check mark or uncheck mark ones, and any of the changes I make are saved. And then when I close this window for EndNote styles, I can simply go up here and just simply check a different link. So here's one for the Journal of the American Dental Association. I highlight it, I go down the preview tab, and I can see how it looks. So that's one of the things you want to do, is you want to go ahead and make that change. Another recommendation that I like to do is I want to make sure that when you bring in a reference into a library that the information is nice and clean. And clean, what I mean by that is you want to really open up each record just as I did before and make sure that all these things are present. The areas that you want to look at are the author name. You want to make sure that those names are formatted correctly. You also want to make sure that the title is put in correctly, as well as the journal name and even pagination at times. Those are usually the areas where it makes sense. Here it says place published. There's that word blank. I'm just going to take that out, and that comma after London. That seems a little unneeded. So we're just going to let go of that. Just know that if this was a junior or any kind of suffix, you just simply put a comma. You would add the suffix. If it's a group name, like a group of researchers, if I just said Greenblatt Research Group as an entity, I just simply put a comma after the group name. And sometimes you'll have to go in and change commas around just to make sure they work. Another thing that I notice here is this title is in upper headline case, and I really don't like that. So what I want to do here is I want to actually go in and I want to change that. So one of the things I want to do here is I highlight the title field, and up here inside the item I can simply change the case. So if I change it down to sentence case, it'll automatically do that for me, and that's now done. When I close my record after I've made changes that I like, first time you do this, it's going to say, do you want to make the changes? I normally just tell it to ignore that and just go ahead. Anytime you make a change and close it, it gets saved. So you can see where we can make those changes. Here's another one that the same type of thing happened. So I'm going to go ahead, just mash that, make it a sentence, style, close it. Those are all the types of things that are important. I also want to note that besides any other things, if you have any kind of scientific chemical name where there are parts of it that are superscripted or subscripted, you can go ahead and add those. Another thing that happens many times is you'll see the word beta or gamma. You can use shortcuts in PubMed when you export items with the symbol beta or gamma or delta in it. Those will get spelled out as words. You can go into the title field, remove that, and simply use one of the codes, the alt codes that are common. You can look those up. They're very commonly found. So let's just say the word beta appeared in here. I'll just put my cursor in there, and if I put Alt 225, it will insert a beta symbol. So it does support that type of idea. You can go in and put in very specialized fonts inside your EndNote library, so that's important to know. It also allows you to bold and italicize. However, if your style does that for you automatically, you do not have to bold or italicize volume numbers or anything like that. The software is designed to do a lot of that for you, so I would not worry about that too much. You don't put periods after a title. The style will actually automatically put that in for you. So those are all things that help mold and shape the library. The other thing that you want to do to get kind of used to things is you want to go ahead and help with term lists. So under Tools, you're going to have a way to open term lists, and one of the things we look at is Journals Terms List. And why is that? Just as we did with the titles of the articles, most databases accept information directly from the publisher to save on processing time when they curate and index a record. So publishers have no uniformity about their content, and so you will see this irregularity where some publishers put things in sentence style, some people use headline style. This happens with journal names. There are some databases that always put things in abbreviated form, so that would be PubMed. However, some output styles like APA6 like the long form of the journal. I can go into databases like Ovid Medline where it automatically will export into the journal field the full name. It just automatically puts in the journal full name. So one of the things we like to do is we just like to use these term lists. So if I went under again, and I'll start that for you, if you go under Tools, Open Term List, and go to Journals Terms List, for every library you can go to the List tab and simply import a list of as many of these that make sense. Obviously here in the Health Sciences campus we're going to add the medical terms because that helps standardize that library, and I click Open, and now we see that there's over 14,000 terms that appear in A to Z order, and if we hit our Terms tab again you can see that that's how they're listed. So that means when the database finds either a full journal or abbreviation name in that journal field, it's going to try to match it up and standardize that for you, so that if you got a record from PubMed, it would know the long form to use if the output style asks for long form, and vice versa. So it's very important. Now if you do happen to find a particular term that wasn't part of the 14,000, and that does happen, there are many records that appear. I think I saw a public health journal, Frontiers in Medicine or something, that was not part of this 14,000. I can simply go to New Term here and add the full journal name and the abbreviation, click Save and then OK, and it would add it to this list. And I can add those other plain texts as well. When you're in Mac and you're trying to import these term lists, you pretty much have to go to the term list folder that's part of the program files for EndNote and dig those out. But it's well worth the time because it does help standardize the names. You don't want to keep opening up a record and changing the names. Now obviously with stroke we don't have to. But here's the Journal of Cerebral Blood Flow and Metabolism. Now in American Dental Association style, that would be considered abbreviated and correct. When we look inside the references pane, we see that it saved it in an an abbreviated form. If I go to APA 6th and click on it, APA 6 likes the long form. I go down to my preview tab, and it's already converted that abbreviated form into the longer form, Journal of Cerebral Blood Flow and Metabolism. So it has tried to add things as much as possible. So you can see where it can save you a lot of time not having to constantly change records to conform to a specific style. So we saw that one of the things we want to look at is the authors. We want to make sure that each author gets their own name. We also want to make sure that the titles are in a form. I'm just going to highlight this, and we want to go ahead and make sure that that's in a sentence form. That's usually what we want. If it was a book chapter or maybe even a report, it would be in headline style, but these are all journal articles, so we're just going to open these and highlight the field, the title field, and let it change the sentence for us. Obviously, if you have a lot of chemical notations and you don't want to do a mass edit, you can go letter by letter and simply replace the uppercase with the lowercase if needed. And then we saw that when we go to Tools, we open the term lists, and we can import term lists to try to standardize those things. Now, when you do term lists, you want to go to Edit, you want to go to Preferences, and we're going to go to that term list area in the left-hand column of EndNote Preferences, and there's going to be a check marks here where it asks you to update the list. We want you to deselect those update lists and then apply and click OK. So we don't want to update lists behind what we're doing. So just make sure that when you do import the term lists that you go ahead in the preferences and also deselect the choices that begin update lists. That will save you some heartache later on. So that's kind of what can happen to you. Let me also describe something I did yesterday in preparation for today's session. I went ahead and went into the New England Journal of Medicine. I found a article about a specific drug for head and neck cancer. This is just an article about it. I looked at the first two paragraphs, and I saw the references that went with it, and I went ahead and created a Word document that repeated those first two paragraphs, and I inserted all the references. I made sure that everything inside EndNote was done by New England style. Okay, so that was something that I did. I'm going to close this sample library, and we'll open up one I created for nivolumab. Let's go ahead and get this opened up. Don't know why that's not opening. Let's try it again. Strange. Alright. It must not like what I did. Alright. Alright, well, let me just go back to the Word document then and just show you what happened. We'll close that one. Sorry, and we'll open the one for nivolumab. And what I did was I compared what I saw on the PDF, how it actually looks, and if I look at the references list here for the 13 references that I saved, and then looked at what I actually printed out, there were differences, and these were all records that I found in PubMed. So I went through and I noted all the differences. And so in number 7 of the reference by Ferris, I noticed that I would have to change this headline style in the title to lowercase. And I had to do that also on 11, 12, and 13. And also under 11, the word gamma was spelled out, so I'd have to go back into the record and put in a code for the Greek symbol gamma to make it more appropriate. So even though EndNote does a great job of making sure that the style is adhered to, you still have to look and edit and make sure that what actually gets printed out agrees with the actual style. Another thing that can happen sometimes, especially with New England, is that after a colon, they do not capitalize the first word after a colon. So like here under make yields here, an open label randomized phase 3 trial, you might actually have to lowercase that A after the colon to make sure that one complies with that style. But you can see where you just have to kind of pay sharp attention to what's going on in the library. So those are all important things to keep in mind. In fact, these are all the records that I had downloaded for that sample library, and I took all of these from PubMed, and yet when I did no editing, there were still problems. So I'm always encouraging you, when you do bring items into your particular library, that you look at everything so that you don't have to do it while you're editing things. In the Word document, you want to make sure that the content of the record is really pure and good. That way there's just fewer edits you have to make later on. So what do we want to do next? Let's go ahead and take a look. I want to make sure that we look at things about some of the other things that you can do. Some of the things you can do I did before. You saw that there was a place here to use icons as opposed to using menus, like a lot of things. That's important. One of the biases I do have is these mode buttons. You're going to find 3 mode buttons on the icon bar. First one's called local library mode, that we've been in since training started. There's also one in here for online search mode. That looks like a globe. And then there's one that has both a globe and a folder, and that's integrated library and online search mode. So I always leave it in library mode because I normally do my searches in a variety of databases. These are proprietary databases, not free ones. And so I always leave it in local library so that I go to the native database and export the record into the library, as I've shown you earlier today. Now, what some of my users do quite successfully is they have a slightly different strategy. You can go and change that mode from local to online mode. And what happens there is this groups panel will change, and all of a sudden we see that online search is available. And there's some free things here that we can maybe get to very easily. And the users that use this online search mode do so because they're going into PubMed. PubMed is free. It's free to the world. So they feel like, oh, I can just simply run a search in PubMed and do that. Now, I will tell you that because you're not using the full functionality of search that you find in the native database by using the PubMed interface, you can get a little bit, you can kind of get into trouble. So if I just put in head and neck carcinoma and just run a search, it's going to run it in PubMed. When I'm in online mode, it's going to hold these. It found 7,000 records, and this is where I kind of have a problem sometimes. If you're a very good searcher and can use other terms to try to reduce this down, it can kind of work out. I don't think that this is a great strategy because you have 7,000 records to go through. You're not looking at the entirety of the record. You're looking at whatever part of the record will appear in a temporary window when you're in online mode. So if I just take the first 25, what it will do is it'll just ping those. And then what I have to do is I have to look at each record and decide, do I want to add it in or not. So here I can add the references to the specific group we can copy the reference to this particular library or another library that I have. So there are some users that do like this. This is temporary. That means it's not permanently being added unless I consciously select the record and move it into a specific library. Now I'm going to simply go back to local library mode and trying to ditch that. If I go to integrated, that's the one with both the folder and the globe. What happens there, if I were to run this search for head and neck and get those 7,000, if I click this little search button, it's going to automatically export that 7,000 into the library. And then they're in the library, and then I have to decide what I want to do with them. And again, I'm not typically in love with this style of exporting things. It's just not a great way to search. You sometimes get overwhelmed by the number of records, but I do have people that do use it successfully with PubMed. It also works well, this style, with catalogs that are free, library catalogs where you're trying to download some book records. But I would tell you that as a rule, since most of our users are really searching for journals, I would rather recommend that you go ahead and run that search in the native database and then export it over. So in mode wise, I'm really looking for you to go ahead and do that. Now, what are some of the other things you can do? You can also go ahead and import records from one into another. So here, remember, I created another library, right? I'm going to try to make this one a little bit smaller. And we can, in a sense, show this side by side. And you can drop and drag or cut and paste records. You can also import entire libraries in. So if I just highlighted things, I could simply add them by simply dragging and dropping. Here I took two by Webb and Zhang. I highlighted them and just dragged them into the nivolumab sample library. So that's another way of kind of moving things around. Another thing that can happen is you might want to be sharing a document. And what I mean by sharing is anybody that uses EndNote can actually go in and edit and add things to a Word document, and the core information is there. So if I were to go to EndNote X8 in Word and go to Edit and Manage, it always tells you what library is there, but there's also what's called a traveling library. So if I had a collaborator that went ahead and added a reference to this particular document, it would be listed as a traveling library item. And I could simply take those records, add them to my library, and all that sort of thing. So it's very sophisticated in terms of allowing you to work. There's also what's called EndNote Online. Right now I'm showing you the desktop version, but you can also match this with EndNote Online. So if you do have a single library and you like that single library system, what you can do is you can sync this with EndNote Online so that you can add records to this library using the online version. You would simply go into Web of Science, and there's a way for you to go in there and simply download EndNote. Here at the very top there's an EndNote link, and you can create an EndNote Online, and you can invite others to use that same library with you and simply add items to it. It's another way to sort of work. I have to admit I'm not a big proponent of it, only because I don't find myself using just a single library. I tend to use a lot of libraries depending on the project I'm working on. However, I will try to help you with that if that's sort of a strategy that you would like to work on. So we've shown you how to populate the library, how to share things. Let's just go over other ways to bring things in. I said that we can import things. We've been exporting things. You can import a file which can include an EndNote library. So I can here choose an import option that includes an EndNote library. I can also import items that come from specific databases. If a database doesn't automatically export something, I can go in and simply ask it to create a record. It'll sometimes recognize other database types, Cochrane specifically. You can also try PDFs. If there's a digital object identifier that's on a PDF document, it will attempt to try to find information about that digital object. Because that's a unique number, it will attempt to find all the bibliographic information, the author, the title, the journal, the year, the volume, the page, and create a record out of it. It's very hit or miss, but if you had a folder of PDFs and you wanted to convert those into EndNote records, you could give it a try to see if it would be able to interpret that with a DOI and add it to the library. It doesn't always work, but it is there for you. Another thing we want you to look at is the Find Full Text. Here you have the reference. Wouldn't it be nice if you were creating a document, a Word document, if you had the full text of the reference with it? So one of the things you can do is you can simply highlight records and then go to Find Full Text by either clicking on the Find Full Text icon, and then what it will do is when you're off campus, it'll ask you to go through the proxy server. We're on campus. I'm just going to simply close that window. And inside my groups panel, you can see that the Find Full Text link is on, and it's searching for PDFs. I've highlighted 6 records. Right now, it's managed to find 4, 5. That's an incredible hit rate. That's actually very good. And so now we actually have 5 full text records. And you can see that down in the reference area, now where we have full text, we can go ahead and look at that article. Remember I said we could write and notate on it. We can also open it in Adobe Reader if we wanted to, if we wanted to maybe look at it in a bigger light. So these are all ways of kind of using EndNote to help. Now let's say I wanted to share something with somebody and I wanted to share this library. One of the ways I can do it is compress or zip it by going to my file, hitting my compressed library link, and I can go ahead and create a library that takes both the EndNote library along with the data folder and compress it together. And that's really the only way that you can attach it to an email. Here you can do it with or without file attachments. Select without if you have a lot of attachments, because obviously there are megabyte limits to what you can send by email. But this is all a pretty cool way. It simply then becomes a different suffix. A .enlx has a slightly different icon look. It looks like a C-clamp, a carpenter's C-clamp, and that's now a compressed library. I'm not going to go ahead and do that, but I just wanted to show that to you. So we saw that we have our modes. We have a way to import and export. I also would recommend that to save a copy of a library that you do not want to rebuild, just as you would back up a Word document that you don't want to rebuild. Also go ahead, you can save a copy, and when you hit that from File menu, in Mac it might be a slightly different one, it simply adds the word copy to the name of the library, and because it's a file, you can save that anywhere. You can save it anywhere that you care to on a computer. So that's one of the important things that you can do. When it comes to references, you can show or hide specific references. It'll also allow you to find duplicates. We know that there's a lot of overlap when you do searches. So if you wanted to get rid of duplicates, it's not a perfect tool, but it's a way to kind of get through some of that. Let's talk about groups. I think that's one area I didn't get to. So when you're inside a group, you can actually create a group by right-clicking on the groups and just simply create a group. And I'll just call this one called Biomed. So anything that comes from this Biomed source, I'm going to highlight these 3. I simply click over, highlight them, and drag it over to the group name. And now instead of running a search, I can just simply go ahead and click, and it will display those. Okay? So the groups, you can create many different groups. It's a way of tagging or making sure that if there's things specifically that you like, that it's there. And then remember, in Word, once you start writing something in Word, you want to insert everything using EndNote, and you also want to go ahead and take things out or edit and manage. That's also important. If for any reason you've changed styles or you want to update things, you do want to make sure that you mash this update citations from time to time. It does help. But anyway, you can kind of pivot, go back and forth by using this ribbon, EndNote X8. It uses the cite while you write to make sure that whatever you do in EndNote gets converted over into Word. So having said that, I'll just go through and I'll just pick two more references. We'll go into Word. In this case, I'm going to hit the icon to insert the citation. It's a quotation mark, and it'll go ahead and do it based on that particular style. And so I think if you take all these things into consideration, if you go ahead and make sure that the data inside each record inside the library is nice and clean by author, by title, and by journals, by using journal term lists, I think that those were all very good ways to manage. You can decide if you want to have a separate library for each project, or if you want to have one master library that you keep copies of. You can also use EndNote to search free sources such as PubMed. So that's one way that you can search. However, again, I have a bias against that, but I have met many people in our faculty who have been very successful using the online or the integrated online system to use EndNote's search box to do that. You can attach files as up to 30 to a single record, and I would say when you export things, just try to export as many things as possible. There's a lot of parts of this that I didn't get to today. It can get fairly complex at times. The only other thing that I would recommend that you do is go into preferences, and if you want to drop myself or another person in our library such as Rod Bustos a line under Find FullText, we can send you an open URL path and the Easy Proxy Authenticator URL. And what that will do is, not all publishers participate in this. You can go ahead and obviously use EndNote to mine for FullText. If for any reason it doesn't work, like it did here with Zhang, you can simply open it up. You know that you can drag and drop or cut and paste a PDF or a common file into the file attachments field, and that's another way to put a PDF. If you can't mine it automatically using Find FullText, once you download the PDF, you can stuff it into that file attachment field and it'll work just fine. Now, in terms of help, I'm available here at the Health Sciences Library. We have 3 other librarians at the Greenblatt Library, so that would be Gail Kwame, that would be Ansley Stewart, that would be Steph Hendren, who are very experienced using EndNote. They would be more than happy to help you. Up on the Reese campus, I would recommend that you contact both Rod Bustos as well as Josette Kubicki. Both of them also do a great job with that particular resource. And in fact, both Rod and Josette have put together a research guide for EndNote. So if I were to type in the word EndNote under research guides, you'll see that there is some good helps here, not only watching this tutorial, but you can also find other library guides and research guides that also help with EndNote, because it can be fairly complex. So we recommend that you use this. It's not totally intuitive, as you can see. Once you get started and invest that 40 minutes in learning it, it'll make a lot of papers and a lot of manuscripts and a lot of journal articles easier to do and put together. We're happy to help support you with a lot of support for EndNote, and we'll be happy to help you at the manuscript level if you need help. I just want to thank you for your time today. I recommend calling me with comments. If you really get stuck, there is EndNote support. So if you type in EndNote support, There is a link to the company, and what you can do is you can not only they want to obviously sell you into it, but they also want to help you with training and downloads. The downloads area is very useful if there's an output style, right, that you simply don't have. Now, they say here 6,000. You don't need 6,000. Several hundred are going to get, many, almost 1,000 get downloaded with the product. You can go to a different area. You don't maybe necessarily have to download everything, but there's also a download site that's available here. And there's also, if you get really stuck, there is an 800 number that you can contact EndNote directly, and they'll try to walk you through any kind of problems you have with this particular item. Again, we want to thank IT for supporting the license for both campuses, and if you need help or support for any of this, we just want to say, we thank them for that. And again, just want to say thank you, and contact us when you're ready to use the product.